The world you are living in does not reward calm. It rewards speed, reaction, outrage, and constant display. News cycles refresh by the hour. Opinions are demanded instantly. Attention is fragmented, and silence is treated as weakness or ignorance. In such an environment, it is easy to believe that anxiety is simply the cost of being informed, that anger is a sign of moral seriousness, and that inner peace is either naive or unattainable. Learn to stay calm and rational in times of chaos. Stoicism begins from a different assumption. It does not deny that the world is unstable, unfair, and often harsh. It does not promise comfort, success, or control over events. What it offers, instead, is something quieter and more demanding: the discipline to remain rational and steady, regardless of conditions, not by suppressing emotion, but by understanding it, not by withdrawing from life, but by meeting it without confusion about what truly belongs to you. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire under constant threat and betrayal. Seneca lived amid political violence and personal loss. Epictetus began life as a slave with no power over his body or status. None of them waited for a peaceful world before practicing calm. They trained their minds precisely because the world was chaotic. This training is not abstract philosophy. It concerns how you respond when plans collapse, when others act unjustly, when the future feels uncertain, and when your efforts go unnoticed. It concerns how you speak to yourself in moments of fear, how quickly you surrender reason to impulse, and how often you allow external events to dictate your inner state. To learn to stay calm and rational in times of chaos is not to become indifferent or passive. It is to become harder to disturb, slower to anger, and clearer in judgment. It is to reclaim authority over the only domain that was ever truly yours, your own mind. Epictetus stated the matter plainly. Some things are up to you, and some things are not. This is not a slogan. It is a line that must be drawn again and again in real situations, under emotional pressure. What belongs to you are your judgments, intentions, values, and actions. What does not belong to you are outcomes, other people's behavior, public opinion, timing, luck, and the final shape of events. Most suffering begins when this boundary is ignored. Much of modern distress comes from a quiet misunderstanding about control. You are taught implicitly and constantly that with enough effort, planning, information, or pressure, you should be able to shape outcomes to your liking. When this belief fails, as it inevitably does, frustration appears first, then anxiety, then anger. The Stoics identified this pattern long ago and treated it not as a personal flaw, but as a philosophical error. Consider how often your mood depends on forces outside your authority. A message is not answered quickly enough. A colleague behaves unfairly. An algorithm hides your work. The economy shifts. Plans fall apart. Each time there is a temptation to say, "This should not be happening," and to let that judgment dictate your inner state. The Stoic response is not denial, but correction. This is happening. The only question is how you will respond. This does not mean approving of injustice or tolerating abuse. It means separating your moral stance from emotional chaos. You can oppose what is wrong without being consumed by rage. You can work for change without tying your worth to results you cannot command. The moment you believe that your inner stability depends on external compliance, you have surrendered your freedom. Modern life intensifies this confusion through constant comparison. You see curated success, selective happiness, and simplified narratives of control. It appears that others are managing better, achieving faster, suffering less. From this illusion arises envy and self-reproach. Seneca warned that comparison is a losing game because it measures your life against fragments of others. It keeps desire restless and reason unsettled. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he would encounter selfishness, ignorance, and hostility, not because the world was broken, but because human beings are imperfect. To expect otherwise is to guarantee disappointment. When you assume that people must act reasonably, kindly, or in your interest, you place your peace in their hands. Stoicism asks you to take it back. In a culture that celebrates instant reaction, restraint appears weak. In truth, it is rare and difficult to pause when provoked, to choose measured speech over retaliation, to accept inconvenience without complaint. These acts require strength of mind. They also protect your clarity. Every time you refuse to react impulsively, you reinforce the habit of rational control. A Stoic does not ask whether life is treating him fairly. He asks whether he is responding virtuously. This shift is subtle but decisive. Fairness is not guaranteed. Character is always available. When your attention moves from demanding outcomes to refining judgment, much of what felt unbearable becomes manageable. Anger deserves special attention because it is often mistaken for strength. Anger feels active, righteous, energizing, yet it narrows perception and accelerates error. The Stoics saw anger as a temporary madness, a moment when reason abdicates authority. This does not mean you should never feel it, but that you should never trust it. The task is not suppression, but delay. Create space between impression and response. Ask whether the judgment driving the anger is accurate, necessary, and useful. Epictetus advised practicing adversity in advance, not to become pessimistic, but to remove surprise. Loss, illness, rejection, and death are not anomalies. They are part of the human condition. When you treat them as unthinkable, they devastate you. When you acknowledge them as possible, they still hurt, but they do not destroy your balance. Anxiety, too, is rooted in misplaced concern. It lives in imagined futures and rehearsed catastrophes. The Stoic does not deny that hardship may come. He prepares for it without panic. He distinguishes preparation from worry. Preparation involves action within your control. Worry involves mental suffering over events that may never occur. One is rational, the other is self-inflicted. This perspective is especially difficult in a world that promises security and permanence. Careers are marketed as stable, relationships as guarantees, technology as solutions. When these assurances fail, the shock is amplified. Stoicism offers no such promises. It offers resilience instead. You are not entitled to comfort, but you are capable of endurance. This distinction restores dignity. It removes the need to see yourself as a victim of circumstance or a hero of outcomes. You become, instead, a steward of your own mind. This stewardship requires daily attention. It is practiced in small moments. How you speak when interrupted, how you think when criticized, how you act when disappointed. Stoicism does not ask you to withdraw from ambition or effort. It asks you to pursue them without attachment to outcome. Work diligently, but do not confuse effort with entitlement. Speak honestly, but do not demand applause. Care deeply, but do not cling. Each of these adjustments reduces inner conflict. Responsibility is another concept often misunderstood. To accept responsibility for your judgments is not to blame yourself for everything that happens. It is to recognize where your power begins and ends. You are not responsible for being treated unjustly. You are responsible for whether injustice makes you bitter, reckless, or cruel. You are not responsible for loss. You are responsible for whether loss erodes your integrity. The illusion of control is tempting because it promises certainty. Stoicism replaces it with something quieter and more reliable: self-command. When you stop insisting that the world conform to your expectations, you free energy for what actually matters. You become less reactive, more deliberate, and harder to destabilize. By learning where your control truly lies, you begin to experience a different kind of stability. Not the fragile stability of favorable circumstances, but the durable stability of a mind that knows its own domain and governs it well. This is not one-time realization. It is a discipline. Each day presents new tests, new provocations, new uncertainties. The aim is not perfection, but progress. Each moment of regained composure is a victory. Each corrected judgment is training. In modern life, desire is continuously stimulated and rarely questioned. You are encouraged to want more efficiency, more recognition, more pleasure, more certainty. Each desire carries an implicit demand that the world arrange itself to meet your expectations. When it does not, frustration follows. Seneca observed that poverty is not the state of having little, but of wanting more. This applies as much to attention and validation as it does to money. Much of the unrest you experience does not come from what you lack, but from what you cling to. Desire, when left unexamined, becomes a source of constant agitation. It promises satisfaction and delivers restlessness. The Stoics did not argue against wanting things. They warned against becoming dependent on them for your sense of worth, safety, or identity. Attachment deepens this problem. You attach not only to objects and outcomes, but to roles, images, and narratives about who you are supposed to be. Your sense of self becomes entangled with productivity, status, and approval. When these are threatened, the mind reacts as if something essential were being taken away. Anxiety arises not from loss itself, but from the belief that you cannot be whole without what you are losing. Ego plays a central role here. Ego insists on being seen, affirmed, and protected. It interprets disagreement as insult, delay as disrespect, and indifference as rejection. The Stoics regarded this sensitivity not as sophistication, but as immaturity. A strong mind does not require constant confirmation. It knows its values and acts accordingly, whether or not it is applauded. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that praise and blame are equally unstable. Those who admire you today may ignore you tomorrow. Those who criticize you may be mistaken, or they may be correct. In either case, your task is the same: to examine your conduct and adjust it if reason demands. External opinion does not define virtue. It merely tests your attachment to it. Stoicism asks you to examine these beliefs calmly. It does not demand renunciation, but clarity. You may prefer success, health, and respect. You may work toward them with care, but you are instructed never to treat them as necessities for a good life. The moment you say, even silently, "I cannot be at peace unless this continues," you have made yourself fragile. Impermanence sharpens this lesson. Everything you enjoy is temporary. Relationships change. Abilities fade. Positions end. The Stoics did not view this as tragic, but as natural. Suffering intensifies when you treat temporary things as permanent possessions. Relief appears when you learn to hold them lightly, appreciating their presence without demanding their continuation. This perspective is difficult in a culture built on visibility. When worth is measured by metrics and engagement, it becomes tempting to perform rather than to live honestly. The Stoic response is restraint. You speak when it is right, not when it is rewarded. You act with care, not for recognition, but because it aligns with your principles. This restraint protects you from the exhaustion of constant self-display. Seneca advised practicing the thought of loss, not to diminish gratitude, but to deepen it. When you remember that what you have can be taken, you value it without clinging. You become less fearful and more present. You stop bargaining with fate and start cooperating with reality. This does not eliminate grief. Stoicism does not forbid sorrow. It limits despair. When loss comes, you feel it fully, but you do not collapse into the belief that life is now unlivable. You remind yourself that you were not promised permanence, only the capacity to respond with dignity. Modern distractions make this training harder. Constant noise leaves little room for reflection. Consumption fills every pause. Stoicism encourages deliberate quiet, not as escape, but as observation. In silence, you notice how many desires arise uninvited, how often the mind seeks reassurance, how quickly it resists stillness. Awareness is the first step toward control. Voluntary simplicity is one way the Stoics trained this capacity. By occasionally choosing less comfort, less convenience, less stimulation, you weaken the assumption that ease is necessary for well-being. This practice is not self-punishment, it is calibration. It teaches the mind that it can endure discomfort without panic. In doing so, it reduces fear. Attachment also distorts time. You rush because you believe you are behind. You worry because you believe you are running out. You cling because you believe this moment must secure the future. The Stoic perspective restores proportion. You are here to act well now. The future will unfold as it will. Your responsibility does not extend beyond your present judgment and conduct. When you loosen attachment, you do not become indifferent. You become steadier. You care without desperation. You pursue goals without surrendering your peace to them. You engage with others without demanding that they complete you. This balance is not passive, it is disciplined. The ego resists this discipline because it thrives on intensity. Calm feels like loss of identity at first, but over time, something quieter and more durable takes its place. You begin to experience self-respect, independent of outcome. You trust your ability to adapt. You become less dependent on circumstances to tell you how to feel. This is the Stoic form of freedom. Not freedom from responsibility or effort, but freedom from inner compulsion. When desire is guided by reason and attachment is tempered by acceptance, the mind becomes less reactive and more resilient. You are no longer pulled apart by every change. You remain centered even as life continues to shift. There comes a point where control, desire, and attachment are no longer the central challenges. What remains is suffering itself, not imagined difficulty, but real pain, loss that cannot be undone, injustice that is not corrected, effort that is not rewarded, mortality that cannot be negotiated. Stoicism does not soften these realities. It meets them directly, without illusion and without despair. The Stoics understood that hardship is not distributed according to merit. Good people suffer. Careful plans fail. Cruel individuals sometimes prosper. To demand that the world operate according to moral fairness is to set yourself against reality. Marcus Aurelius warned that this demand does not make you virtuous, it makes you resentful. The question is not whether life is just, but whether you can remain just within it. Injustice provokes anger because it feels personal, even when it is structural or impersonal. The Stoic response is not apathy, but clarity. You are permitted to resist wrongdoing. You are not required to poison yourself with hatred to do so. Hatred clouds judgment and deforms character. Reasoned opposition preserves both effectiveness and integrity. Suffering also exposes the limits of endurance. Fatigue, grief, and despair test not only beliefs but identity. When something central is taken away, the mind asks whether life is still worth engaging. Stoicism answers by narrowing the question. You may lose health, status, companionship, or security. You do not lose the ability to choose how you meet the loss. As long as reason remains, agency remains. This distinction matters in a world saturated with outrage. Moral concern easily becomes performance. Indignation becomes addictive. The Stoic refuses this intoxication. He asks whether his response improves the situation or merely gratifies his sense of righteousness. If it is the latter, he withdraws. Virtue does not need an audience. Epictetus taught that no one can harm you unless you consent to the judgment that you are harmed. This is often misunderstood as denial of pain. It is not. Pain is real. Harm to character is optional. The Stoic distinction preserves dignity when comfort is gone. It allows you to suffer without becoming degraded by suffering. Fear of death often hides fear of unfinished business or misused time. Stoicism responds by shifting attention from duration to quality. A short life lived with integrity is not a failure. A long life wasted in distraction is not a success. The measure is not length, but alignment between values and actions. Mortality gives this discipline its sharpest edge. You are not only going to die, everyone you know will as well. This is not a morbid observation, it is a stabilizing one. When death is acknowledged, trivial concerns lose their grip. Petty conflicts appear smaller. Urgency becomes clearer. Marcus Aurelius returned to this thought not to frighten himself, but to orient his priorities. Burnout is a modern expression of misalignment. You expend energy without meaning. You comply without conviction. You chase goals that do not nourish you. Stoicism does not promise relief through escape. It offers relief through correction. You examine why you are doing what you are doing. You remove what is unnecessary. You endure what is necessary with clearer purpose. Acceptance of fate, often misunderstood, does not mean resignation. It means cooperation with what cannot be changed, an effort where change is possible. The Stoics called this harmony with nature. Not nature as scenery, but nature as reality itself. To fight reality is exhausting. To work within it is sustainable. This acceptance becomes especially important in grief. Loss demands acknowledgement, not explanation. Not explanation. Stoicism does not instruct you to replace sorrow with platitudes. It instructs you to prevent sorrow from becoming self-erasing. You remember that what you loved was never owned, only experienced for a time. Gratitude and grief are not opposites. They coexist. Through all of this, virtue remains the anchor. Virtue for the Stoics is not moral perfection or public approval. It is the consistent effort to act with wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation. These qualities are not dependent on mood or circumstance. They are practiced precisely when conditions are difficult. The disciplined mind does not expect life to spare it. It prepares to meet life as it is. When suffering comes, as it must, it does not ask why this happened. It asks how to respond without betraying itself. That question, asked sincerely, keeps you whole even when circumstances do not. In moments of clarity, you see that external losses do not touch this core. You may be weakened, slowed, or limited. You are not made meaningless. This realization does not remove pain, but it prevents collapse. You remain upright under weight. In this way, Stoicism is not a shield against suffering. It is a framework for meeting it without losing your center. It trains you to endure without bitterness, to resist without hatred, and to face mortality without panic. Calm here is not the absence of difficulty. It is the presence of reason where difficulty exists. Calm and rationality are not traits you either possess or lack. They are habits formed through repeated attention. No one remains steady at all times. Even the Stoics wrote to correct themselves, not to declare mastery. What matters is the direction of effort and the willingness to return to reason after losing it. Understood. I'll continue with the conclusion next. Keeping the same tone, discipline, and constraints, the world will not become quieter. Demands will continue to multiply. Injustice, uncertainty, and loss will remain part of human life. Waiting for favorable conditions before cultivating inner discipline is a mistake. The practice exists for these conditions, not apart from them. Each day offers opportunities to train restraint, clarity, and proportion in small, unremarkable moments. You are not asked to withdraw from responsibility or ambition. You are asked to carry them without confusion about what they can give you. External success may come or fail to come. Approval may appear or vanish. None of this determines whether your mind is governed well. That judgment belongs to you alone. When you attend to your thoughts, question your impressions, and act according to principle rather than impulse, something shifts. You become less reactive, less dependent on circumstances for stability, more capable of facing difficulty without escalation. This is not emotional numbness, it is emotional order. Calm is not found at the end of chaos. It is cultivated within it, by a mind trained to see clearly, judge carefully, and act with integrity, regardless of what unfolds around it. If you find value in this way of thinking, continue exploring it. Reflection deepens with repetition. Understanding grows through application. This channel exists to support that discipline, not as motivation, but as steady guidance. If you choose to follow, let it be as part of a long practice, not a quick solution. Stoicism does not promise peace as a permanent state. It promises composure as a practiced response. Again and again, you are invited to return to what is within your control and to release what is not. This return is the work.